Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he locked up the small electronics repair shop. Another long day of fixing broken phones and tablets had drained him, but at least the bills were paid this month. The autumn rain had started again, turning the narrow alley behind his shop into a maze of puddles and shadows. He was about to head home when he heard it, a soft, pitiful meowing coming from behind the dumpster. Marcus sighed. This was the third stray cat this week. His small apartment was already home to 7 rescued cats, and his landlord had made it clear that any more would mean eviction. But as he approached the dumpster, something made him pause. The meowing wasn't coming from just one cat. There were at least a dozen voices, all crying in distress. Marcus pulled out his phone's flashlight and peered behind the metal container. What he saw broke his heart. A group of cats huddled together in a cardboard box, their fur matted and wet from the rain. They looked starved and sick. But one cat stood out from the rest. She was larger than the others, with unusual silver-blue fur that seemed to shimmer even in the dim light. Her eyes were the most striking feature, a deep violet color that seemed almost to glow. "Hey there, beautiful," Marcus whispered, extending his hand slowly. The silver cat looked at him with those strange eyes, and for a moment he felt like she was studying him, judging his character. Then she meowed once, a sound that was deeper and more musical than any cat he'd ever heard. Marcus looked at his phone. It was almost midnight, and the animal shelters would be closed. He couldn't leave these cats out in the rain. His practical mind told him to call animal control in the morning, but his heart had other plans. "All right, you win," he said to the silver cat, who seemed to be the leader of the group. "But just for tonight." He went back to his shop and grabbed several empty boxes and some old towels. It took him 3 trips to get all 13 cats up to his second-floor apartment. His existing cats watched with curiosity as he set up temporary beds in his living room. The silver cat was the last one he carried up. As he held her, he noticed she was surprisingly heavy for her size, and her body temperature seemed higher than normal. When he set her down, she immediately went to each of the other strays, touching noses with them in what looked like a greeting or perhaps instructions. "What's your story, girl?" Marcus asked, opening a can of cat food. The silver cat looked at him again with those intelligent violet eyes and made a series of soft, chirping sounds. The other strays immediately formed an orderly line behind her, waiting their turn to eat. Marcus had never seen cats behave so organized. Usually, feeding time was chaos, with cats pushing and competing for food. But these cats waited patiently as the silver one ate first, then stepped aside to let each of the others take their turn in what seemed like a predetermined order. After the cats had eaten, Marcus set up water bowls and makeshift litter boxes. He was exhausted, but he couldn't help watching the silver cat. She had positioned herself near the window, sitting perfectly upright with her tail wrapped around her paws, staring out at the night sky. Her posture reminded him of the Sphinx statues he'd seen in museums. "You're not like other cats, are you?" he said softly. The cat turned her head toward him, and for just a moment, Marcus could have sworn he saw something ancient and wise in those violet eyes, something that didn't belong in a stray cat's body. He shook his head and headed to bed. It had been a long day, and he was probably just tired. But as he drifted off to sleep, he kept thinking about those eyes and the way the other cats seemed to treat the silver one with reverence. The next morning, Marcus woke to find his apartment transformed. All 13 cats were sitting in perfect rows in his living room, facing the window where the silver cat sat like a queen holding court. When he appeared, they all turned to look at him in unison. "Okay." "That's definitely not normal," he muttered. The silver cat stood and walked over to him, then did something that made his blood run cold. She reached up with one paw and gently touched his hand, and suddenly Marcus heard a voice in his head, clear as if someone was speaking directly to him. "Thank you for your kindness, Marcus Chen. You have given shelter to those who had none, and for this you have my gratitude." Marcus stumbled backward, his heart pounding. He looked around the room, thinking someone had played a prank on him, but there was no one there except the cats. The silver cat tilted her head. "You are surprised. Good. It means you are not completely naive to the ways of the universe." "This isn't possible," Marcus whispered. "Cats can't talk. I'm having a breakdown." "Too much stress from work." The cat's whiskers twitched in what might have been amusement. "I am not speaking as your Earth cats speak. I am communicating through the neural pathways that all intelligent species share. Your mind is more open than most humans, which is why you can hear me." Marcus sat down heavily on his couch, surrounded by cats who were all watching him with keen interest. "What are you?" "My name is Liralay," the silver cat said, "and I am what your people might call a dragon." Marcus laughed, a short, sharp sound. "A dragon. Right. You're a cat. A talking cat, apparently, but still a cat." Liralay's eyes flashed, and for a moment the temperature in the room seemed to rise. "Appearances can be deceiving, Marcus Chen. I am indeed a dragon, but I have been diminished. Trapped in this form by those who seek my power." "Even if that were true," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady, "why are you telling me this?" "Because you showed kindness without expectation of reward. You saw creatures in need and helped them, even though it caused you hardship. Such compassion is rare, even among my own kind." The other 12 cats had remained silent during this exchange, but now they began to move, forming a protective circle around Liralay. Marcus noticed that several of them had the same unusual eye colors: deep gold, emerald green, and silver. Not typical cat colors at all. "These others," Marcus said slowly, "are they also—" "My court," Liralay confirmed. "Or what remains of it. We have been in exile for many years, hiding among your people's animals, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Liralay looked out the window again. "For the time when we can reclaim what was stolen from us. For allies who might help us in our cause, or for enemies who might find us first." As if summoned by her words, a shadow passed over the window. Marcus looked up to see a sleek, black helicopter hovering outside his building. It was unlike any aircraft he'd ever seen. Too quiet, too smooth, with no visible markings. The cats in his living room all tensed at once. Liralay's fur began to stand on end, and her violet eyes now glowed with an inner fire. "They have found us," she said, her mental voice tight with worry. "Who?" Marcus asked, but even as the word left his mouth, he saw figures rappelling from the helicopter onto his fire escape. They moved like soldiers, but their equipment was wrong, too advanced. The weapons they carried hummed with energy, and their black armor seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Marcus Chen," Liralay said urgently, "in the next few minutes, you will have to make a choice. You can surrender me and my court to these hunters and return to your simple life. Or you can help us and become part of something far larger and more dangerous than anything you have ever imagined." The first of the armored figures reached his window and began cutting through the glass with some kind of energy tool. Marcus looked at the cats surrounding him, at Liralay with her ancient wise eyes, at the 12 others who had somehow become his responsibility. He thought about his quiet life, his small repair shop, his carefully managed routine. Then he thought about the trust he'd seen in Liralay's eyes when she'd first looked at him behind the dumpster. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Liralay's eyes blazed brighter. "Help us reach the roof. There is something there that can aid our escape, but we will need your human hands to activate it." The window exploded inward in a shower of glass and energy. The first armored figure stepped through, weapon raised. But before Marcus could even think about what he was doing, he was already moving, scooping up Liralay in one arm and running toward his apartment door. "The stairs. Lyrelai directed. To the roof. Quickly. Behind them, Marcus heard the sound of more windows breaking as the other hunters entered his apartment. The 12 cats flowed around his feet like water, moving in perfect coordination as they raced up the narrow stairwell. As they climbed, Lyrelai spoke rapidly in his mind. The device on the roof is an emergency beacon. My people placed it there months ago when we first arrived in this city. If you can activate it, help will come. What kind of help? Marcus gasped as they reached the roof access door. The kind that breathes fire, Lyrelai said grimly. Marcus kicked open the door and stepped onto the roof of his building. The night air was cold and sharp, and he could see the lights of the city spread out below them. But he didn't have time to appreciate the view. Heavy footsteps were already echoing in the stairwell below. "Where's this beacon?" he asked. Lyrelai jumped from his arms and ran to what looked like an ordinary ventilation unit near the edge of the roof. But as she approached it, panels slid back to reveal a crystalline device that pulsed with soft blue light. "Place your hand on the crystal," she instructed. "Your human biosignature will activate it." Marcus hesitated for just a moment. Once he touched that crystal, there would be no going back to his old life. He would be committed to whatever this was, whatever Lyrelai and her court represented. The door behind them exploded outward, and the first hunter stepped onto the roof, weapon trained on them. Marcus pressed his palm against the crystal. The world erupted in light. The crystal's light shot skyward like a blue spear piercing the darkness. Marcus felt energy coursing through his hand and up his arm, a tingling sensation that was both warm and electric. For a moment, everything was silent except for the humming of the beacon. Then the hunter's weapon discharged with a crackling sound, sending a bolt of purple energy where Marcus had been standing a second before. But Marcus was no longer there. Lyrelai had somehow pushed him aside with strength that shouldn't have been possible for a cat her size. "Stay down," her voice echoed in his mind as more hunters poured onto the roof. There were 6 of them now, all carrying those strange energy weapons. Their faces were hidden behind dark visors, but Marcus could see the way they moved, precise, coordinated, deadly. These weren't ordinary soldiers. The 12 cats had spread out across the rooftop, staying low and moving like shadows. But Lyrelai stood tall in the center of the roof, no longer trying to hide what she was. Her silver-blue fur was now glowing with the same light as the beacon, and her violet eyes blazed like stars. "Surrender, Exile!" one of the hunters called out, his voice distorted by some kind of electronic modulator. "The High Council demands your return!" Lyrelai's response was a sound Marcus had never heard from any earthly cat. It was deep and resonant, like a growl mixed with wind chimes and the rumble of distant thunder. The sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. "The High Council has no authority here," she replied, and this time Marcus could hear her voice with his ears as well as his mind. "This world is under the protection of its native species. You violate treaty by being here." The lead hunter raised his weapon. "The treaty means nothing when you consort with primitives. You have revealed yourself to this human. That breaks the accords." "I revealed myself to save innocent lives," Lyrelai snarled. "Something the council seems to have forgotten how to value." Marcus watched this exchange with growing confusion and fear. Treaty? High Council? What had he stumbled into? The hunter was about to fire when the beacon's light suddenly intensified. The crystal now blazed like a miniature sun, casting sharp shadows across the rooftop. In the distance, Marcus could hear a sound like thunder, but there were no clouds in the sky. "Too late," Lyrelai said with satisfaction. The thunder grew louder, and Marcus realized it wasn't thunder at all. It was the sound of massive wings beating the air. Something was coming, something big enough to create wind that rattled the windows of nearby buildings. The hunters looked up, and for the first time, Marcus heard uncertainty in their electronically distorted voices. "Impossible," the lead hunter whispered. "They were all accounted for." A shadow passed over the moon, and Marcus got his first glimpse of what was approaching. It was enormous, easily the size of a passenger jet, but organic, alive. Dragon wings that spanned the width of a city block caught the moonlight as the creature descended toward them. But this wasn't the dragon of fairy tales. This being was elegant, beautiful, and terrifying all at once. Its scales were deep emerald green that shifted to gold along its belly, and its eyes were like molten amber. When it opened its mouth, Marcus could see rows of teeth that gleamed like polished ivory. The dragon landed on the neighboring building with surprising grace for something so massive. The structure groaned under its weight, but held. It folded its wings and lowered its great head to look directly at the rooftop where they stood. When it spoke, its voice was like controlled thunder. "Sister," Lyrelai bowed her small cat head respectfully. "Thalorian, you received my signal." "Indeed, and it appears I arrived at an opportune moment." The great dragon's amber eyes fixed on the hunters. "Gentlemen of the Void Syndicate, you are trespassing." Marcus noticed the hunters had all taken a step back, their weapons now seeming pathetic against the massive creature before them. But the lead hunter held his ground. "Lord Thalorian," he said with forced respect, "we hunt only the Exile and her conspirators. The human is an unfortunate complication, but one that can be resolved quickly." Thalorian's eyes narrowed, and smoke began to drift from his nostrils. "The human is under my protection, as is my sister and her court. The council will not—" "The council," Thalorian interrupted, his voice rising to a roar that shook windows throughout the neighborhood, "can take their objections up with me personally." The lead hunter hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Marcus could see the calculation in his body language. Was completing this mission worth facing an adult dragon? Apparently not. The hunter made a sharp gesture to his team. "We withdraw, but this is not over." "No," Thalorian agreed, smoke still curling from his nostrils. "It is not." The hunters activated some kind of device on their armor, and one by one they simply vanished. Not in a puff of smoke or with dramatic effects, but simply there one moment and gone the next. Within seconds, the rooftop was empty except for Marcus, the cats, and the enormous dragon perched on the next building. Marcus stood slowly, his legs shaking. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving him feeling hollow and confused. "Okay," he said, surprised by how steady his voice sounded. "I think I need some explanations." Lyrelai approached him, her fur still glowing softly. "You deserve answers, Marcus Chen. You have risked everything to help us." Thalorian shifted on his perch, turning his great head to study Marcus more closely. "This is the human who sheltered you." "Yes," Lyrelai confirmed. "He took us in when we were cold and hungry, asking nothing in return. Even when he learned what we truly were, he chose to help us." "Interesting." Thalorian's amber eyes seemed to see right through Marcus. "Tell me, human, what do you know of dragons?" Marcus rubbed his forehead, trying to process everything that had just happened. "Until tonight, I thought you were myths, stories for children." "We have worked hard to maintain that illusion," Thalorian said, "for the safety of both our species, but circumstances have forced us to reveal ourselves to you." "The High Council," Marcus said, remembering what the hunters had called themselves. "Lyrelai is in exile." "Why?" Lyrelai's cat form seemed to droop slightly. "Because I believed that our two species, dragons and humans, could coexist openly. The council disagreed. They said humans were too primitive, too violent, too unpredictable." "So they banished you?" "Not exactly," Thalorian interjected. My sister was given a choice: abandon her beliefs about human potential or prove them. She chose to prove them. Marcus looked between the small silver cat and the massive dragon. How? By living among you, Lyrelai explained. In this diminished form, with only my most loyal court members. We were to observe human society, learn your ways, and report back to the council. And what did you learn? Marcus asked. Lyrelai's violet eyes seemed to glow brighter. That the council was both right and wrong. Humans can indeed be violent and unpredictable, but they can also be compassionate and brave. You proved that tonight. Thalorian nodded approvingly. Few humans would have made the choice you did, Marcus Chen. When faced with danger and the unknown, most would have chosen safety over loyalty. I couldn't just abandon them, Marcus said simply. No, Thalorian agreed. You could not. And that, sister, is why the council fears humans so much. Marcus frowned. I don't understand. Lyrelai jumped onto a nearby air conditioning unit, bringing herself closer to eye level with Marcus. Dragons are long-lived and careful in their decisions. We plan for centuries ahead and rarely act on impulse. But humans make choices based on their hearts as much as their minds. It terrifies the council because it's unpredictable. But it's also, Thalorian added, why humans have accomplished so much in such a short time. Your species has gone from living in caves to exploring space in just a few millennia. Dragons took millions of years to achieve similar advances. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Those hunters, the Void Syndicate, they'll be back, won't they? Thalorian's expression darkened. The Void Syndicate is not part of the Council, though they sometimes work together. They are mercenaries. They hunt dragons for our power, our knowledge, our very essence. They want to capture Lyrelai. They want to harvest her, Thalorian said grimly. Dragons in exile are seen as easy targets. Separated from our realm, weakened by transformation, we become vulnerable to their technology. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. But you're here now. You can protect her. For a time, Thalorian agreed. But I cannot remain on Earth indefinitely without creating an incident between our species. My presence here is already pushing the boundaries of our treaties. Lyrelai looked up at her brother, then at Marcus. There is another way. Both Marcus and Thalorian looked at her expectantly. The human could be bonded to our court, she said quietly. As a guardian and protector, it would give us the right to remain on Earth under his protection and give him access to our abilities to defend against the Syndicate. Marcus blinked. Bonded? What does that mean exactly? Thalorian's amber eyes widened. Sister, you cannot be serious. A human has never been bonded to dragonkind. Because we have never tried, Lyrelai replied firmly. The old ways have brought us to this point. Hiding, scattered, hunted. Perhaps it is time for a new way. The process could kill him, Thalorian warned. What process? Marcus asked, though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know. Lyrelai turned to him, her violet eyes serious. Bonding would link your life force with ours. You would gain some of our abilities, enhanced strength, limited telepathy with our court, resistance to the Syndicate's weapons. But the process is dangerous for humans. Your physiology is not designed to channel dragon energy. And if it works, then you become the first human guardian of dragons, Lyrelai said, and we become the first dragons to have a human as part of our family. Marcus looked around the rooftop. Below them, the city continued its nightly routine, unaware that everything had just changed. Above them, stars glittered in the clear autumn sky, and here, between the mundane and the cosmic, he stood at a crossroads. If I don't do this, he said slowly, what happens to all of you? We run, Lyrelai admitted. We hide. We hope the syndicate loses interest, and eventually, either the council calls us home in defeat, or the syndicate catches us. And if I do agree to this bonding, then we stand and fight, she said simply. Together. Marcus thought about his quiet life, his repair shop, his routine. Then he thought about the way the 12 cats had looked at him with trust, the way Lorelei had protected him from the hunter's weapon, the way she had called him family. "How do we do it?" he asked. Thalorian let out a sound that might have been a sigh. "You are as impulsive as she said humans are." "Is that bad?" "In this case," the great dragon said, settling more comfortably on his perch, "it may be exactly what we need." The bonding ritual took place in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Thalorian had carried Marcus there on his back, an experience that Marcus was fairly certain no other human in history had ever had. Flying through the night sky on Dragonback, watching the lights of the city shrink below them, had been both terrifying and wonderful. Now they stood in the empty space, surrounded by Lorelei and her court. The 12 cats had arranged themselves in a perfect circle, their eyes glowing softly in the darkness. Lorelei sat in the center, no longer looking like an ordinary cat. Her silver-blue fur rippled with inner light, and Marcus could see her true nature shining through the small form. "Are you certain about this?" Thalorian asked one final time. "Once the bonding begins, there is no turning back." Marcus knelt in the circle, his heart pounding. "I'm sure. The process will be painful," Lorelei warned him. "Dragon energy is not meant for human bodies. Your cells will need to adapt or I die," Marcus finished. "I understand." One of the court cats, a beautiful golden female with emerald eyes, spoke for the first time. Her mental voice was musical and sad. "In our long history, we have lost many to the syndicate. They steal our essence, drain our power, and leave us as empty shells. If there is a chance to prevent that fate, then it's worth the risk," Marcus agreed. Lorelei approached him slowly. "Place your hands on the ground and open your mind. Do not fight what you feel, no matter how strange or overwhelming it becomes." Marcus pressed his palms flat against the concrete floor. The moment his skin made contact, he felt something surge up from the earth beneath them. Energy, ancient and vast, flowed into him like electricity through water. The sensation started as warmth in his chest, but quickly grew into something more intense. It felt like lightning was racing through his veins, like his very atoms were being rearranged and rebuilt. His vision blurred, and he could hear his heartbeat thundering in his ears. Then Lorelei touched her small paw to his forehead, and the world exploded into color and sensation. Suddenly, Marcus could feel the consciousness of every dragon in the circle. Their thoughts, their memories, their emotions flooded through him in a torrent that threatened to wash away his own identity. He experienced centuries of history in moments. The rise of dragon civilization, their first contact with humans, the wars that had driven them into hiding. But more than that, he felt their loneliness. For all their power and wisdom, the dragons were a dying race. Their numbers had dwindled over the millennia, and they had become so focused on preservation and safety that they had forgotten how to truly live. Through the bond, Marcus also felt something else, the presence of the Void Syndicate. They were not human, as he had assumed, but something far older and more dangerous, an alien species that fed on psychic energy, particularly the powerful life force that dragons possessed. They had been hunting dragons across the galaxy for eons, following them from world to world. The energy flowing through Marcus intensified, and he cried out in pain. His human body was struggling to contain the dragon force, and he could feel his cellular structure beginning to break down. This was the moment Thalorian had warned him about. Adapt or die. But as his body began to fail, he felt the dragons pouring their own strength into him. not just Lorelei and her court, but Thalorian as well, and through him, distant dragons from their hidden realm. They were sharing their life force with him, helping his human physiology evolve to accommodate their energy. The transformation was agony. Marcus felt his bones densifying, his muscles restructuring, his nervous system rewiring itself to handle new sensory input. But gradually, the pain began to fade, replaced by a sense of completion he had never experienced before. When he finally opened his eyes, the world looked different. He could see energy patterns flowing through everything. The dragons, the building around them, even the distant city lights. His hearing had become incredibly acute, picking up conversations from blocks away, and in his mind, he could feel the constant, comforting presence of the dragon court. "It worked," he whispered, his voice somehow deeper and more resonant than before. Lorelei looked up at him, and he realized she was no longer trapped in her small cat form. Before his eyes, she began to grow and change, her silver-blue fur becoming scales that caught the light like polished metal. Within moments, she had returned to her true form, not as large as Thalorian, but magnificent nonetheless. Her dragon face was elegant and regal, with the same violet eyes he had come to know so well. When she smiled, revealing rows of crystalline teeth, it was the most beautiful thing Marcus had ever seen. "Welcome to the family, Guardian," she said, her voice now a melodious rumble. The other court members had also transformed back to their true forms, 12 dragons of various colors and sizes, each unique and powerful. They bowed their heads to Marcus in a gesture of respect that felt both alien and deeply moving. Thalorian landed beside them, his amber eyes bright with amazement. "I have never seen a successful interspecies bonding. You are truly something unique, Marcus Chen." Marcus stood slowly, marveling at how strong and coordinated his transformed body felt. "What exactly am I now?" "Human," Lorelei assured him, "but enhanced. You retain your humanity while gaining access to our abilities. You are the bridge between our species that I always hoped could exist." Before Marcus could respond, alarms began blaring from the city. Through the warehouse windows, they could see strange lights in the sky. Not aircraft, but something else entirely. "The Syndicate returns," Thalorian growled. "And they have brought a harvest ship." Marcus looked up at the massive vessel descending through the clouds. It was easily 10 times larger than Thalorian, shaped like a twisted spiral of dark metal and pulsing energy. Smaller ships were detaching from it, heading toward various points throughout the city. "They're not just hunting you anymore," Marcus realized. "They're going after every dragon on Earth." "The bonding ritual created a massive energy signature," Lorelei explained grimly. "It was like setting off a flare that told them exactly where we are." "So what do we do?" Thalorian spread his massive wings. "We do what dragons do best. We fight." 13 dragons against an entire harvest fleet? One of the court members asked doubtfully. 14, Marcus corrected, surprised by his own words. "I'm part of this family now." "Right?" Lorelei looked at him with pride. "Yes, but Marcus, you've only just been bonded. You don't know how to use your abilities yet." "Then teach me fast," Marcus said, watching as Syndicate ships began landing throughout the city. "Because ready or not, this fight is coming to us." Over the next hour, Marcus received the most intensive training of his life. The dragons taught him to channel energy through his transformed body, to communicate telepathically across vast distances, and to coordinate with the court in perfect synchronization. He learned that his human intuition and adaptability complemented their ancient wisdom and power in ways none of them had expected. Where they might spend hours debating strategy, he could make split-second decisions that turned out to be exactly right. Where they relied on centuries of experience, he brought fresh perspectives that revealed new possibilities. The first wave of syndicate hunters arrived at the warehouse just as Marcus was getting the hang of energy projection. These were not the same soldiers from the rooftop. These were the real thing. Tall, insectoid creatures in powered exoskeletons carrying weapons that hummed with captured dragon essence. "Remember," Lirelai told him as they prepared to face the attackers, "you are not just human anymore, but you are also not just dragon. You are something new. Trust your instincts." The battle was unlike anything Marcus could have imagined. Dragons wheeled through the air, breathing streams of various elements: fire, ice, lightning, and pure energy. The syndicate creatures moved with mechanical precision, their weapons designed specifically to counter dragon abilities. But Marcus found that his hybrid nature made him unpredictable. The syndicate had studied dragons for millennia, but they had never faced a human dragon guardian. His tactics were chaotic and improvised, making use of his environment in ways that confused the alien hunters. When a syndicate warrior cornered one of the smaller court dragons, Marcus didn't breathe fire or conjure lightning. Instead, he grabbed a piece of construction equipment and hurled it with his enhanced strength, crushing the creature against a wall. When another hunter tried to drain Lirelai's energy with a capture device, Marcus interfaced with the warehouse's electrical system and overloaded the alien technology. "Fascinating," Thalorian commented mid-battle as he incinerated a group of attackers. "He fights like no dragon ever would." "Exactly," Lirelai replied, using her claws to disable a syndicate ship. "And that's why it's working." The first wave was defeated, but Marcus knew this was only the beginning. Through the bond, he could sense dozens more ships descending on the city. The syndicate was mounting a full-scale harvest operation. "We need to take out that mothership," he said, pointing at the massive spiral vessel hanging over downtown. "Impossible," one of the court members protested. "It's shielded against our breath weapons, and its armor is too thick for conventional attacks." Marcus studied the ship with his enhanced vision, tracing the flow of energy through its systems. His human engineering background, now enhanced by dragon perception, showed him something the others couldn't see. "Not impossible," he said slowly. "Just difficult. The ship's power source is centralized. But it has to vent excess energy somewhere. There. Those spiral patterns aren't just decorative, they're thermal exhaust ports." "Even if you're right," Thalorian said, "the ports are too small for any of us to enter." Marcus smiled. "Good thing I'm not entirely dragon, then." The plan was insane, but it just might work. Using his smaller size and hybrid abilities, Marcus would infiltrate the mothership while the dragons provided a distraction. Once inside, he would disable the power core, bringing down the shields and allowing the dragons to destroy the vessel. "If you don't make it out," Lirelai began. "I will," Marcus assured her. "We're family now. Family doesn't abandon family." The flight to the mothership was a nightmare of syndicate fighters and defense turrets. But the Dragon Court fought with desperate courage, clearing a path for Marcus to reach the thermal exhaust port Thalorian had identified. Squeezing through the narrow opening was like crawling through a furnace, but his transformed body could withstand the heat. Inside the ship, Marcus found himself in a maze of corridors filled with captured dragon energy, the harvested essence of dozens of dragons kept in containment cells like batteries. The sight filled him with rage. These weren't just energy sources to the syndicate. They were the life forces of sentient beings, stolen and enslaved. He began freeing the trapped essences as he made his way toward the power core, and each one strengthened his resolve. The ship's power core was a thing of alien beauty, a crystalline structure that pulsed with stolen dragonfire. But Marcus's enhanced senses showed him the weak points in its structure, places where human engineering instincts suggested critical failures could be induced. He placed his hands on the crystal matrix and began to channel his own energy into it. Not to power it, but to disrupt its harmonic frequency. The core began to vibrate, its crystalline structure developing stress fractures that spread like spider webs. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship as Marcus made his way back to the exhaust port. Behind him, the power core's failure was causing cascade failures throughout the Syndicate vessel. Emergency lighting flickered as systems began shutting down one by one. He reached the exhaust port just as the mothership's shields failed. Through the opening, he could see Thalorian and the others approaching, their forms wreathed in righteous fire. Marcus dove from the port just as the dragon fire struck the ship's hull. The explosion lit up the night sky like a second sun, and the massive Syndicate vessel began its long fall toward the empty harbor below. Lorelei caught him in mid-air, her powerful wings carrying them both to safety as the alien mothership crashed into the water with a sound like thunder. All around them, smaller Syndicate ships were retreating, their harvest operation thoroughly defeated. "Is it over?" Marcus asked as they landed on a nearby rooftop. "For now," Lorelei confirmed, "but they will return eventually. The Syndicate never gives up completely." "Then we'll be ready," Marcus said simply. Thalorian landed beside them, his amber eyes thoughtful. "The Council will want to meet you, Guardian. What you have accomplished here tonight will change everything between our species." Marcus looked out over the city he had helped save, then at the dragons who had become his family. In the distance, he could see his small apartment building, probably full of confused neighbors, wondering about all the explosions and lights. Tomorrow, he would have to figure out how to explain this to his landlord. He would need to modify his repair shop to accommodate dragons. He would have to learn to balance his human life with his new responsibilities as a guardian. But tonight, he was exactly where he belonged, standing with his family, ready to face whatever challenges the universe might bring. "Let them come," he said, feeling the strength of the bond flowing through him. "We'll show them what humans and dragons can accomplish together." Lorelei nuzzled his shoulder with her great head, her violet eyes bright with affection and hope. "Welcome to the beginning of a new age, Marcus Chen," she said. "Guardian of dragons, bridge between worlds, and the best stray we ever could have hoped to find."